because I want to get just you.
I'd like to call
And
the March
the
11th
department.
Public Safety Committee meeting to order.
So I got my headshots for the officers that we have a good photo.
We can do.
Do I have a motion
You
to
can.
accept
Yes. So
Second.
moved.
Second.
the all in favor?
Aye.
Do I have approval of the February 11th meeting minutes?
Motion to approve.
Abstain.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Nobody signed up for public comments. Now we will move on to ordinances and resolution. Ordinance 2025-11, a resolution approving and establishing policy for certain secondary employment for Hendersonville Fire Department employees. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do you want it to discuss it, or would you like to discuss
It's
it?
best if I let Jesse and Chief Bush do it.
Sure. So this is a mechanism to allow fire personnel to work at our parks or after hours. So when they're not on duty, but to be in an HFD uniform and to utilize the UTV. Similar to how we see police officers maybe at a church service on Sunday where they're employed directly by the church to work there. This would just carry over for the fire department. So if someone comes to the city and they want to put a tournament or an event on, there's a mechanism in place for the fire department to work there in an after hours capacity where that tournament director or the vendor will pay them directly. And the city's basically authorizing the use of the uniforms, the UTV, and things of that nature. So Chief Bush can expand upon that, but it's basically mirroring what we do for police, and we're just extending it to fire as well.
Yeah, I mean, just as Mr. Ecknerall said, it's just something to give staff an opportunity. There's a lot of events in the parks that sometimes we won't have the staffing or not be able to staff the UTV because of staffing levels. I know Andy has some contracts that require that the UTV be present. That's part of the signed agreements with the mayor and Jesse and Director Gilly. And so those will always be provided regardless if that causes overtime or not. But these are for other events that maybe big softball tournaments may come in that we don't have the staffing, and they may say, hey, we'd like to pay, and it gives them an avenue to do that. They pay a fee for the vehicle, $75 a flat rate, and then a minimum of $35 an hour for the two folks that would be working on the UTV. And it would be up to those staff, if they signed up for that, to negotiate that with the vendor that's offering for that. We would not be involved in that whatsoever other than the use of the vehicle.
How do you decide who's guaranteed a UTV and who has to pay to have a UTV?
That's not really been discussed or touched on. Like I said, there's some agreements that are offered in a contract. I know cross country, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong. Is cross country one of those or no?
Anytime we host a TSSAA event, that becomes part of the contract. There are certain ones that we have had contracts for in the past. Currently, just your regular guy comes in, hosts a softball tournament. We don't have a contract with those people. They come in and host hockey, roller derby, lacrosse, rugby, baseball, softball, flag football, grass volleyball. We don't have contracts with those people other than they just turn in an application and we approve it.
Gotcha.
So anytime the fire personnel are on our clock, the UTV is included. If it's off the clock, then there's a flat fee of $75 a day.
Okay. Any more questions?
What was the policy before this? No policy?
Yeah, there wasn't after hours for the fire department. It was just the police did it, but we didn't have it for fire department. So now we have a mechanism for fire too.
Okay.
I'm in favor of this. I'm glad to see that we're doing this. So if you don't have any more questions, I recommend that we move it to Bowman with a positive recommendation. Do you
Second
have any
that.
more questions?
All in favor?
Aye.
It moves to Bowman with a positive recommendation. Next, we have Resolution 2025-13, a resolution inviting TCRS to hold an information session for public safety personnel on the Bridge State Retirement Plan and establishing a voting surveying process to gauge the consensus. Anybody want to talk about it? Do you have any questions about it?
I don't feel like I know hardly anything about the bridge program at all. Which is a pretty broad sweeping question.
You could come to the meeting.
That's
Come
That's
to the
what
meeting.
this will be about.
Well, and that's
too.
so, I'm all in favor of having a meeting to learn more.
I am too.
Motion to approve, or do we have to send this to the BOMA? Motion to approve. So send to BOMA with approval,
With a positive
with a
recommend-
positive
Okay.
recommendation.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries with a
Thank you all.
positive recommendation. Okay. The top 50 calls for 2024, we have the list, and I think at the last meeting, we decided we would evaluate, like y'all do some education and get back with us in 6 months. Do you have more questions?
Well, I'll explain why I asked that question for the list. I just wanted to see some history of what it was. It came about because I was taking a CPR class at the YMCA and ran into the fire department there, helping somebody. And we had just had that discussion of assisted living facilities, and it just popped in my head. How often do we go to gyms or physical fitness facilities? So I talked to Jesse, and he gave me that list, and I think the list is very enlightening and has a lot of stuff. And the one thing I would point out when you start looking at some of the numbers, there's some places we visit, if you take it on an average and spread it out every other day of the year. I mean, for a year, every other day, they have their numbers are high enough that we're going there 150 times and more. So it's certainly something that needs to be considered to manage costs and expenses. And that's why I asked for that list.
Great, and very helpful. So we want to reevaluate that.
I think we should stay on course with the 6 months that we're doing. We have this as a benchmark of what it was last year. If it goes down, that, affects how we would handle it. If it goes up, it probably creates some urgency in my mind. So I would say
We don't
stay
have.
the course, stay it for 6 more months.
All right. And then one thing I wanted to ask Chief Bush, if you could talk about the legislation that just went. Do you have a question? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
What I can also do is I can also reach out to some other cities and see if they're in a similar situation, how they saw it.
That would be helpful.
Do that. Okay.
Anybody else before I move on? So I wanted to see if you could give us some information and update us, the exciting news of you going to the legislator and what has happened.
So going back to Captain Diamondback, which will be later tonight, there'll be a Medal of Valor from the Sons of the American Revolution that will be presented tonight at the meeting. But to go past that is there has been a lot of legwork involved with getting 3 more types of cancer added already to the 2019 Berry-Brady Act, pancreatic, prostate, and breast cancer. So all 3 of those are on the floor to be added. We went to a subcommittee meeting 2 days ago, and it was a unanimous 7-0 to move it forward. The professional association had me down yesterday to speak about it. There were some folks there, legislators and some senators and things like that we spoke about it. And they see the urgency and the need for that. And then it goes to another subcommittee tomorrow for a vote. And I think out of 33, there was 30 that were on board with this. So it looks like it's going to have a positive recommendation moving forward to add those 3 cancers to the Berry-Brady Act.
Can you just explain what that means in case there's somebody watching or people don't know what that
Sure.
means
So
to have that?
it's a presumptive bill, which means obviously, as a city, we have to have 5 years of consecutive, evaluations, physicals. So if you have a break in that, so you want to do physicals for 3 years, we offer them every year. But if you decide for one reason or another, as an individual, not to do the cancer screening or any other type screening, you can opt out of that. However, with the Berry-Brady Act, if you opt out of that, then it resets the clock. You have to have 5 consecutive years of medical exams that show that you had either an existing issue or a non-existing issue. And we certainly are encouraging our folks to sign up from day one and move forward with that, because if you don't and there's a gap and then you catch it, you're still trying to play catch up. So it's a presumptive bill. It's very important to the fire service. 74% of the deaths in the fire service last year were related to cancer, and 9% more of a risk for firefighters than anybody else in the American population to contract cancer of any form.
Do your cancer screenings include a scan?
We're going to appropriate some money this year for those. Hopefully, we're trying to negotiate with Hendersonville Hospital to try to keep our money here locally. They were kind enough to do the heart scans for us a couple of years ago. It's not necessarily a requirement every year. The scans may be a little bit different because they are scanning the entire body. I know the local has brought in a company individually, and some of the guys are paying, even myself, are going to pay out of our pockets to have those screenings, those scans done, because we haven't had the money appropriated yet for the upcoming budget year to do that. And we certainly didn't have the money appropriated for it this current year.
Do you know what they cost?
About $350 is what it's costing us per person. So I think it's relatively inexpensive for early prevention, right? If we catch it fast enough. I'm not saying it would or would not have made a difference in Don's case. I mean, we don't know that. I think there was a firefighter in Florida, maybe 2 weeks ago, that was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer unnoticed, and he died like 12 days after he was diagnosed with it. So I think this thing is going to grow some legs, unfortunately, and we're going to try to do our best to try to catch it, prevent it early on.
That's great. Any other questions?
Question, Mr. Chairman. Are there any occupational health issues with the police department? I mean, I know that you're not around the smoke inhalation or fire, but are there any, is the Brady bill just for fire?
Yes, sir.
It's not for public, for first responders?
That's not for police officers, not yet, no, sir. Now, there is a PTSD bill, that's the Dust and Samples bill, that covers law enforcement, I think EMS and firefighters, all, which post-traumatic stress syndrome is a real deal too. I still don't think we know. That was actually my project, my EFO program in December of 23. That was my end project, was doing all the studies on that. PTSD is a rising crisis in emergency services as well. And that's basically the end result is suicide rates for firefighters, police officers, EMS, which I think to me would go hand in hand with the bridge, why we don't want folks exposed to this stuff continually for a long period of time, because people are taking their lives due to the things that they are either suppressing, not knowing how to deal with it, or it's just too much for them. Whether that's a one-time event or it's a career-long exposure to events.
Chief Jones?
So Chief Bush mentioned the PTSD bill, and there was a heart and lung bill that Tennessee passed several years ago, but each individual city had to opt into that. Hendersonville did not. And what it addresses is stress-related heart conditions for law enforcement officers, but it also covered lung issues for firefighters. So that's the only one that I'm aware of, but primarily the issues that we see long-term with law enforcement officers are heart issues and stress-related illnesses, high blood pressure, hypertension, and those types of things.
So I noticed on social media, Chief Bush put some statistics down on cancer prevalence among fire. Have there been any studies on cardiac or hypertension or anything for the police department?
There may have been. I'm not aware of it if they've done that. I know that it, again, there was some information that was presented years ago with our bill, but each individual city had to opt into it across the state of Tennessee, and Hendersonville did not at the time. So.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I like the way you heard me.
Did you see my hair?